Makkot Daf Kaf Aleph Amud Bet and Kaf Bet Amud Aleph. Deconstructing Complexity. Yesh Chorsh Telem Echad. So in Daf Yud Zayin we spoke about the fascinating idea of a barrier, the idea of an integrated system, that when a system is integrated into one being, it has a value that exceeds the sum total of its component parts. And that a barrier, no matter how small, is never too small to be relevant. It will always be relevant. Nevertheless, there are differences in value between barriers. It's true that a barrier is never bottle and a barrier is never irrelevant, but an ant is not the same value as a human being. They're both barriers, but the value is a completely different value. And the value depends on the quantity of its components and the complexity with which the barrier is assembled. That will determine the value of the barrier. A human being is made up of many more components that are integrated in ways that are far more complex than that of an ant. And this idea of a barrier conceptually applies not only to organisms, it applies to things as well. So you could take a $10 quartz watch. That's a kind of a barrier. It's all put together. It's an integrated system. And it's not the same value as our $50,000 golden Rolex watch. They both tell the time. In fact, the $10 quartz watch tells better time than the $50,000 Rolex watch. So why would anybody spend $50,000 on the golden Rolex? So the answer is because a connoisseur looks at an object and understands the components it's made from, the brilliance of the engineering of how it's put together, and the value of each of its components, not only the whole. And we need to understand that's the difference between a connoisseur and an amateur. A connoisseur looks at an object or at a work of art or whatever and sees and is able to break it down into its components. A connoisseur of wine can break the taste of the wine down into all sorts of little different components. The ordinary person says a glass of wine and can't really tell the difference between one and another. And being a connoisseur applies not only to golden Rolexes and to bottles of wine. Being a connoisseur applies to human actions. It applies to thoughts. There are people who are connoisseurs of ideas. They understand the complexity of an idea and the brilliance with which an idea is created. There are connoisseurs of actions, connoisseurs of mitzvot. They understand the complexity of the mitzvah and how it's put together and formed together. That's what a Talmud Chacham is. A Talmud Chacham is a halachic connoisseur. And he understands and appreciates these things properly. A person might have said to my father, "Thank you for everything you've done for me." My father used to stop the person and say, "Thank you for everything means thank you for nothing. Tell me what exactly you're thanking me for. What did I do for you?" And then the person stops in their tracks, and now you've got to start thinking. And my father used to explain, that's the Dayenu. It's not just thank you, Moshe, for taking us out of Mitzrayim and bringing us to Eretz Yisrael. No, this was a long process with a whole lot of different steps. Each one has value. And the way they're put together creates the whole story of Yetzias Mitzrayim and coming to Eretz Yisrael and the building of the Beis Hamikdash. But unless you break it up into your steps, you miss the value. It's not an amateur says, "Thank you for taking me out of Mitzrayim." A connoisseur says, "Ilu Hotzianu," etc., breaking it down into its components. And my father would say the same is with apologies. Somebody would say to him, "I'm sorry if I did anything to offend you." Erev Yom Kippur, sorry if I did it. Be moichel if I did it. He would say, "Sorry for anything is sorry for nothing. If you're apologizing, tell me what you're apologizing for, and we can talk about it." Just in general, we tend to create these generic bundles of things, and then they lose their meaning, they lose their value. In our sugi, we go further than that. Not only shouldn't we bundle a whole lot of actions together to create one bundle, but even sometimes individual actions should be broken down into component parts. We need to deconstruct even individual units and understand their complexity, because these are ideas or actions or mitzvot, halachot, nested within of ideas, and one has to penetrate to really be a connoisseur, to take them out and break them up. So for example, if somebody brings me a bottle of wine for Shabbos, I could say, "Thank you very much." I could say, "Thank you very much for the bottle of wine." But I could say, "Thank you very much. Do you know what your bottle of wine did? It enabled me to make Kiddush. I was able to perform an incredible mitzvah with a bottle of wine that you gave me. You saved me time. I didn't have to go to the store and buy a bottle of wine. And with that time, I was able to sit and learn a parsha of Chumash with my grandchild. You enabled that. And at the table, It enabled us to have pleasant conversation and enjoy the wine. And it was a bottle of wine I've never seen before. You expanded my taste in wines, and it became a conversation piece at our table. You expanded the experience of everybody who was at my table. All of that with your bottle of wine. Thank you so much. That's a thank you. That's a completely different level of thank you. And that's how we're meant to understand each other's actions. That's how we're meant to understand our own actions. And that's how we're meant to understand the actions of the Rebbeinu Shalom. We spoke on Daf Tet Zayin about awareness and the power of awareness and how short-lived awareness is, the 4-second awareness. Here we get a bit of an idea of the quality of awareness. What does awareness really mean? And the idea of a connoisseur of a mitzvah, a connoisseur of an avera, a connoisseur of halakha. What does it really mean and how? So we learn this from Deconstructing Averot in the Mishnah on Daf Chaf Aleph at the top of the page on Amud Bed, where the Mishnah says, Yesh choresh telem echad v'chayav alav mishum shmon elavim. A person can do one activity, plow one furrow, and he can be doing 8 averot, 8 lavin, each justifying malchus, for that one action. So don't just look at actions. Don't just look at an avera as, he did an avera, he plowed this furrow. The Mishnah goes on to constructing how it's possible to have 8 different. It could have been kilayim, and it could have been with a shor and a chamor, and it could have been with on shvius, and it could have been on Yom Tov. You can put it together in such a way that there are 8 different transgressions in one activity, in that one action. Shabbos is potentially different. So if you look at the first posuk, I bring in the source sheet on Shabbos, it says, Lo taseh kol melacha. What is Shabbos? Don't do any melacha. So the Torah itself is packaging it all together. We know there are 49 melachot. The Torah says, Kol melacha, don't do any melacha on Shabbos. So I might think that Shabbos is really about the singularity of activity, or of desisting from activity. It's about not doing all the melachot. That's what Shabbat is. No, says the Gmorra, we learn the Gmorra in Shabbos from the fact that further on the Pasuk says, Lo tevaru eish. It gives us a specific love. You shall not light a fire on Shabbos. And the Gmorra in Shabbos asks, but we've already said, don't do any melacha. We don't specify all 39 melachot. Why is havara specified? Answers the Gmorra, Rabbi Nosson in the Gmorra answers, that havara comes out, of course, av melacha chayavin alea bifnei atzma. This is a case of where we learn from this one melacha that is specified separately, that any case of an av melacha gets its own malkot. We're punished separately for each thing that one does. It's not just generally, I broke Shabbos. No, I broke Shabbos by doing this. I broke Shabbos by doing that. I broke Shabbos by doing a fourth or a fifth thing. Different ways in which I can break Shabbos. Each one is a full breakage of Shabbos. Each melacha is a system. Each melacha is a world. It's not that Shabbos is a system. It has 39 melachot. Yes, Shabbos is a system, it has 39 melachot, but each melacha is a system. And that we learn from Lo tevaru eish, that you've got to study each melacha as a complete system of its own. What about Yom Tov? So this Lo tevaru eish is specifically for Shabbos. We know that it doesn't apply on Yom Tov if one's doing it l'tzorech ochel nefesh. And certainly Bishul doesn't apply. So Yom Tov has a whole different set of criteria. Is it possible that this rule, this love coming for the specific purpose of chiluk melachot, that does not apply on Yom Tov? Absolutely, says Rava in the Gmorra, yesh chiluk melachot b'Shabbat ve'ein chiluk melachot b'Yom Tov. And that's explained by the Rambam in Hilchos Yom Tov, haoseh avot melachot harbe b'Yom Tov b'atra'ah achat. If a person did many different wrongdoings on Yom Tov, but just one warning, I see you're about to do some things, and I said, it's Yom Tov, you can't do this, you can't do that, and you do a whole lot of things. Ein eloka ela achat, you only get malchus once, because you've broken one system. The system is Yom Tov. What about Shabbos? Shabbos is every melacha is its own. That's Shabbos. But on Yom Tov, Lo tevaru eish doesn't apply. Chiluk melachot, says the Rambam, l'Shabbat, ve'ein chiluk melachot l'Yom Tov. The Rambam quotes Rava from our Gmorra that says you have this idea of melachot being broken down into individual systems. You have that rule for Shabbat. You don't have that rule for Yom Tov. So on Yom Tov, unlike all other cases, we know the general case. We've got we know yesh choresh telem echad v'chayav alav mishum shmona lavin. That in all other cases you can package it, even though you package them together in one action, the halacha breaks them up again into 8 specific lavim. The same applies on Shabbat, even though it says lo taseh kol melacha. On Shabbat as well, each one is broken up into a system on its own. Only on Yom Tov we have the principle of ein chiluk melachot b'Yom Tov. Based on that, the Gmorra asks a question. Abaya asks Rava and says, if that is so, that on Yom Tov, it's all packaged together. Unlike all other cases, Yom Tov, it's all packaged together. He asked a question from a brisa, where the brisa says, if a person cooks a gid hanasher in milk on Yom Tov and ate it. Gid hanasher, you remember, is that sinew that we're not allowed to eat. And he cooks it on Yom Tov in milk, so he's cooking on Yom Tov. He's eating a gid hanasher, he's basar b'chalav, it's meat and all these things. Lokeh chamesh, he gets 5 different sets of malchot. And among the ones he gets, the brisa says, he gets for mevashel, and he gets for mavir. He gets for lighting the fire, and he gets for cooking. Asks Abaya, if there's no chiluk melachot on Yom Tov, why is he getting 2 separate ones for bishul and havara? It's on the fire and it's cooking, but that's one action. You put it on the fire and it's cooking, that's one action. It should be 1, not 2. That's Abaya's question of Rava. And Rava accepts it and says, you're right, you actually got to make a change. He doesn't get malchot for havara, for lighting the fire, and for cooking. It's only 1. Asks the Shaigas Arya. There's a Shaigas Arya. The Gvura Ari is written on a few Masechtas. One of them is Makkot. We've got a Shaigas Arya on Makkot. And my copy of the Shaigas Arya is very precious to me because it was given to me by the Basriel Goldfund for my 30th birthday. And he inscribed a beautiful note in it. So it has a very special place in my heart, the Gvura Arya. We have it on Masechta Makkos. And the Shaigas Arya says, I don't understand Abaya's question. This, that there's no chiluk melachot on Yom Tov, that's where you're doing one action that has 2 lavim. But here, you're not doing one action with 2 lavim. You light a fire, and then you put the food on the fire. One is lighting a fire, one is cooking. Of course, even in Yom Tov, there'll be 2 actions. What is the question even? Says the Shaigas Arya, and he works through it very beautifully. Therefore, you have to say that we're talking in a case where you do it simultaneously. That you put the gid hanasher, you put the pot on the stove, and then you turn the stove on. So now that one action of turning the stove on is both havara and triggering the process of bishul. So one action, the action is turning the stove on, it's lighting the fire. You must be talking that you light the fire when it's already on, and with that he resolves a whole lot of other things. But what's important from the Shaigas Arya is he underpins the underlying fundamental principle of this whole sugya, which is in one action there are many component parts. That applies in Chorsh Telem Achat, in regular Isurim of the Torah and regular prohibitions. It applies in Shabbat, even though it says Lo Taseh Kol Melacha, because it also says Lo Tavaru Esh. The only place it doesn't apply is on Yom Tov, where on Yom Tov, if you do 2 things in one action, there's only 1 set of Malkot. But the principle generally applies that you deconstruct activities into their component parts, and you appreciate each one for its component parts. And what's important here also is to see it's not just physical component parts. It's not just the components of the Rolex watch. It's not just the different actions. You're cooking and you're lighting a fire. It's even conceptual part. What is the love? There's only one activity. Physically, only one thing happened. You turned on a stove. That's all that you did. When you put the pot on the stove, there was no fire, so that wasn't an issue. Physically, there was only one action. Conceptually, you're breaking it up. So that's the real connoisseur that can take an action and see in the action there is expressed a number of different concepts, a number of different ideas, a number of different lavim. You can look at one work of art and you can see a whole lot of different messages. There are a whole lot of different meanings in that one work of art, and one can understand that. That's the connoisseur. And that's where, for example, when the Chofetz Chaim says in the beginning of his Sefer that if one speaks a word of Lashon Hara, 14 mitzvahs haseh you're over, and 17 mitzvahs lo taseh. One word of Lashon Hara, to be able to understand. When you deconstruct it, you realize, wow, what have I just done? I spoke Lashon Hara. That's how you devalue something, by packaging it into one thing. I spoke Lashon Hara. If you actually went through, and when you do tshuva, you actually go through the 14 mitzvot aseh, and you go to the 17 mitzvot lo taseh. Of each time we spoke Lashon Hara, okay, then you realize what this is all about. And the same applies with mitzvot aseh. If we're standing in davening, what are we doing? It's through this tefillah and this kriyat shema. And we're being becoming the mitzvah of ahavat Hashem, of love of God, of emunah b'Hashem, of belief in God, of bitachon b'Hashem, of trust in God, of yirat shamayim, of fear of God. These are all mitzvot we're mekayim with one activity of davening. And to be able to break that down adds to the value, the appreciation, if we're a connoisseur of mitzvot, if we understand what that really means. And so with understanding the levels of awareness that are needed, again, back on Daf Tezayin, where we spoke about awareness, look at the levels of awareness we're capable of, to understand every moment of lost opportunity, what it really is, every moment of wrongdoing, what it really is, and likewise, to understand the opportunity for mitzvot that we have at every moment of every day, not just to do a thing, to do a mitzvah, but to do a world of mitzvot, to create systems of mitzvot. With each moment that we have those opportunities, and to be able to see the whole system with its component parts, to be able to look at Torah and Halacha as a connoisseur looks at a Rolex watch, not as an Amaretz looks at a quartz watch, and to realize a watch, yeah, it's a mitzvah. How many mitzvahs did I? No. Look at each one, deconstruct it, understand and appreciate the magnificent engineering and the artistry in each one of them. And as you do a mitzvah, bring your whole self into it, as we've discussed in the Shir on awareness. Bring your whole self into it and make sure that you're doing the mitzvah in the fullness of its complexity, not in the simplicity with which an Amaretz might view the mitzvah.